Welcome to our deep dive today. It's exciting stuff we're going to be looking at. A totally new approach to anxiety and maybe even treatment. We've got some fascinating material to go over. And to help us navigate this new perspective, we've got a leading expert in the field, Dr. Danish Sebastian Svane. We're going to be looking at this book called Forstå Angsten by Thomas Fav Vinter. It's published by GenerationAnxiety.com. And let me tell you, this book really challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom around this incredibly common issue. You know, over 350 million people globally are dealing with an anxiety diagnosis.
Yeah.
So the book makes a bold claim right out of the gate. Anxiety is not a mental illness, but a reaction problem to discomfort.
That's right.
What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly a provocative statement,
Yeah.
and one that initially might seem counterintuitive, given how we've traditionally approached anxiety. But you know what's compelling about Vinter's work? Is that it's grounded in a rational, evidence-based framework. He's not just throwing out a radical idea, he's backing it up with research and, importantly, with results. The book highlights a 95% recovery rate using this method,
Wow.
which is significantly higher than what we typically see with traditional treatments.
It's an incredibly high success rate. I'm very curious to understand how this method differs from traditional approaches like medication, CBT or MCT. But first, I think it's important to unpack this core idea. Anxiety is a reaction problem. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Certainly.
What does it actually mean in a practical sense?
The book argues that our brains, in an attempt to make sense of unfamiliar or uncomfortable physical sensations, can misinterpret them as threats. This initial misinterpretation triggers the anxiety response, the racing heart, the dizziness, the shortness of breath. It's our brain's way of trying to protect us from what it perceives as danger.
So it's not that the physical sensations themselves are dangerous. It's our interpretation of them that creates the problem.
Exactly. The book breaks it down even further by outlining 5 key causes of recurring anxiety.
Oh.
First, we misinterpret those initial physical symptoms of anxiety as dangerous, leading to fear and avoidance.
Okay.
Second, we develop anxiety about the anxiety itself, a fear of those feelings returning. Third, we start avoiding any situations that we think might trigger those feelings.
Okay.
Fourth, those avoidance behaviors actually trap us in the anxiety cycle, reinforcing the fear. And finally, the language we use to talk about anxiety, saying things like, I have anxiety, further solidifies it as part of our identity.
That makes sense. If we're constantly telling ourselves and others that we have anxiety, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right.
But how does this new method, this reaction problem approach, address these underlying causes? What's the key to breaking free from this cycle?
The book focuses on working directly with memory, specifically long-term memory, where these anxiety associations are stored. It suggests a surprisingly simple, yet potentially powerful tool, the consistent repetition of the phrase, I am not sick.
Wow. I was definitely struck by that when I read the book.
Yeah.
On the surface, it seems almost too simple. Can you explain the reasoning behind this method? How can simply repeating a phrase help rewire those deep-seated anxiety responses?
The phrase, I am not sick, is strategically designed to interrupt the negative thought cycle associated with anxiety.
Okay.
It serves as a reminder that the anxiety itself is not a disease, but a learned reaction.
So it's not about suppressing the feelings or
Right.
pretending they don't exist. It's
Yeah.
about changing our relationship to them,
Exactly.
about reinterpreting what they mean.
Precisely. And the book emphasizes that this is a process, not an overnight fix.
Sure.
It takes consistent effort, repetition, and a willingness to challenge those deeply ingrained beliefs about anxiety.
Okay. That brings us to another interesting aspect of the method. The visual reminders. The book suggests creating posters with the phrase, I am not sick, and placing them throughout your home. Even carrying notes with the phrase, or setting it as your phone background. It almost sounds like a form of subliminal messaging.
The visual reminders serve as constant reinforcement, further strengthening the new associations. You're building in your long-term memory.
Oh.
It's about creating an environment that supports your recovery, a space where you're consistently reminded that you are not defined by your anxiety.
It's like we're actively rewiring our brains, you know,
Yeah.
by creating these new positive associations. And from what I understand, the book also emphasizes the importance of understanding the science behind anxiety, the role of memory, like the impact of language. It seems like knowledge itself is a crucial part of this process.
Absolutely. The book delves into the different types of memory: sensory, short-term, and long-term,
Yeah.
and how they each contribute to our anxiety response.
Oh.
For example, a certain smell might trigger a panic attack because your sensory memory associates it with a past negative experience. Or you might find yourself worrying about an upcoming presentation because your long-term memory holds the belief that public speaking is dangerous.
So by understanding how these different types of memory interact,
Right.
we can start to identify
Mm.
the specific triggers
Mm,
and thought patterns that fuel our anxiety.
that's right.
It's like shining a light on the inner workings of our minds.
Precisely. And this understanding,
Mhm.
it empowers us to challenge those ingrained patterns, to question the validity of those beliefs. It's about reclaiming our power
Right.
over our thoughts and feelings.
This all makes a lot of sense. But I do have one question. We've talked about traditional anxiety treatments like medication, CBT,
Mhm.
and MCT. How does this new method compare to
Right.
those approaches? Does the book address their limitations?
The book acknowledges that while those treatments can be helpful for some people, they often fall short in addressing the root cause of anxiety. Medication, for instance, might temporarily relieve symptoms, but it doesn't change the underlying thought patterns or beliefs that
Mhm.
drive those symptoms.
Right. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a deeper wound.
Yeah.
And what about therapies? Like CBT and MCT, they're designed to change thought patterns, which seems more in line with this new method.
True, both CBT and MCT can be effective for some individuals, but they often involve a significant time commitment and can sometimes require revisiting past traumas, which can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
And while they do focus on changing thought patterns, they don't always challenge the fundamental belief that anxiety is a disease, something that needs to be cured or controlled.
So this new method is taking a more radical approach,
Yeah.
shifting the focus from managing symptoms to transforming our core beliefs.
About anxiety itself.
Exactly. It's about recognizing
Yeah.
that anxiety is not a sign of weakness or illness, but a natural human response that can be relearned and unlearned.
And that brings us back to the power of the "I am not sick" phrase. It's not just a positive affirmation.
It's a declaration of self-empowerment,
Yeah.
a rejection of the disease model of anxiety.
I couldn't agree more. It's about reclaiming agency. Recognizing that we have the ability to shape our own experience, to rewrite the narrative of our anxiety.
You know, one thing that struck me about this method
Yeah.
is its emphasis on consistency and persistence. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
It's a journey that requires ongoing effort. And the book specifically highlights the importance of involving loved ones for support.
Yes, human connection is absolutely essential in this process.
Uh-huh.
Having a supportive network of friends, family, or even a therapist who understands this approach can make a world of difference.
Yeah.
Sharing your journey with others, having people who believe in you and encourage you can provide invaluable strength and motivation.
And they can also help you stay accountable,
Absolutely.
gently nudging you back on track.
Yeah.
Those old anxiety patterns try to resurface.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, there will be times when those familiar thoughts and feelings
Mm.
creep back in.
Absolutely, but the key is to view those moments, not as failures, but as opportunities for learning and growth.
Okay.
Each time you experience anxiety, you have a chance to practice this new method, to reinforce those positive associations, to strengthen your belief in your own ability to overcome it.
It's about building resilience, about developing the tools and mindset to navigate those challenging moments with grace and confidence.
Precisely, it's about shifting from a place of fear and avoidance to a place of empowerment and self-compassion.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation so far. We've covered
Okay.
a lot of ground. From the core concept of anxiety as a reaction problem to the power of the "I am not sick" phrase and the importance of creating a supportive environment for recovery. But I'm eager to delve deeper into the practical application of this method. What are some concrete steps listeners can take to start implementing this new approach into their lives?
It's one thing to understand the theory, but putting it into practice is where the real transformation happens. The beauty of this method is its simplicity. You don't need any fancy equipment or years of training. It all starts with that core phrase, "I am not sick."
Right. And the book suggests making this phrase a constant presence in your life. We talked about the visual reminders, creating posters, carrying notes, even setting it as your phone background. It's about surrounding yourself with this message, almost like creating a positive affirmation sanctuary.
Exactly. The more you see it, the more it seeps into your subconscious, gradually replacing those old negative beliefs. But it's not just about passive exposure. The book also emphasizes the importance of actively repeating the phrase throughout the day, especially when you feel those anxious feelings starting to rise.
So it's about using the phrase as a tool, a way to interrupt those negative thought patterns and redirect your focus.
Precisely. When you feel that wave of anxiety coming on pause for a moment, take a deep breath and say to yourself, I am not sick. Say it with conviction, with a sense of knowing. And remember, it's not about denying or suppressing the feelings. It's about acknowledging them without judgment and choosing to respond differently.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about reclaiming your power in those moments, reminding yourself that you are not defined by your anxiety.
Exactly. And as you practice this consistently, you'll start to notice a shift. Those anxious thoughts and feelings won't have the same grip on you. You'll have a new tool, a new perspective to navigate those challenging moments.
The book also mentions the importance of involving loved ones in this process. Can you speak to that a bit? What role can our support system play in our recovery?
Having a supportive network of people who understand and believe in this method can be incredibly helpful. They can provide encouragement, accountability, and a safe space to share your experiences. It's important to remember that you're not alone on this journey. There are others who have walked this path and come out the other side.
And if someone is listening to this feeling inspired and ready to try this method, what advice would you give them? Where should they start?
I'd say start by educating yourself. Read the book Förstå Angsten, dive deep into the concepts, understand the reasoning behind the method, and really let it sink in. Then start small. Begin by incorporating those visual reminders into your daily life. Put up a poster, carry a note, set that phone background, and then start practicing the phrase. Make it a habit to repeat, I am not sick throughout the day, especially when those anxious feelings surface.
So it's about taking action, about putting this knowledge into practice, even if it feels a little strange or uncomfortable at first.
Exactly. And remember, it's a process. There will be ups and downs. You might have days where you feel like you're making great progress, and others where you feel like you're back to square one. But the key is to be patient with yourself, to keep practicing, and to trust that with consistent effort, you can rewire your relationship with anxiety.
This has been a truly enlightening conversation. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, if you're struggling with anxiety, know that you're not alone. There is hope, there are new possibilities, and you have the power within you to create a life free from fear and worry. If you're seeking a radically different, more empowering approach to anxiety, I highly recommend exploring the full book, Förstå Angsten. It could be the key to unlocking a whole new level of well-being. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep believing in the power of your own mind to create the reality you desire.